just glad to see you again.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Development and looking ahead.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jordan Dahl, and I am Politico's automotive reporter. You are watching Politico Live, the live extension of our nonpartisan journalism. The next European Commission will soon be in place, and President Ursula von der Leyen has made corporate fleets one of the transport portfolio's top priorities for this term. But the name of the game is going to be competition, not climate, this go-around. And the discussions around fleet targets come as Europe's automotive champions are in crisis. They're facing higher operating costs, a slowdown in sales, and thus less revenue from the ever-important China market and increased competition. Domestically, questions abound around infrastructure, sluggish demand from consumers, and the most important question of who is actually going to be paying for this transition. We will be discussing this and more with our star-studded panel of speakers very shortly. But first things first, I would like to thank our sponsor, Uber, for making this event possible, and a warm thank you to our audience joining us in person and those joining us online. We would like to make this event as interactive as possible. You can participate by tweeting about it at @LivePolitico and ask questions through Slido using the hashtag #EVRideshift. We like knowing who you are, so we'll be prioritizing questions from those who say their name and organization, so that way it's clear to our viewers and our panelists. You can already begin sharing your thoughts and answering the following poll. What should be the top priority of the Greening Corporate Fleets initiative? And we'll take a look at the results at the end of our panel. But before we welcome our panelists, please welcome to the stage Chris Hook, the Global Head of Sustainability Strategy at Uber.
Thank you, Jordan. It's my pleasure to be here with you today, here in the European capital, home of the Green Deal, and globally recognized as one of the driving forces behind our response to the climate crisis. It's a fitting location for what I really hope will be a galvanizing discussion on the central role that we think professional drivers, like Uber drivers, can play in our shared race to electrify road transportation here in Europe. It's also right that we're here in Brussels because Uber's global ambition was born here in Brussels to be a zero-emissions platform. I joined Uber back in the summer of 2019 to see if we could get an electrification decarbonization program off the ground. Back then, it was just a single city project. But in 2020, inspired by the Green Deal and in close collaboration with our friends at Transport and Environment, we decided it was time to go bigger. We set ourselves some ambitious goals. We wanted to become a zero-emissions platform here in Europe by 2030 and everywhere we operate across the world by 2040. We also said that we would be 50% zero emissions in our 7 major European cities by 2025. Of course, such bold goals meant we needed to put some skin in the game. So that's why we committed $800 million to helping drivers go electric. We partnered with some of the biggest car manufacturers in the world, the likes of Stellantis, Kia, BYD, and we built a raft of tech solutions in our own product to try and make it as easy as possible for riders and drivers to go electric. Since then, I think we've made pretty remarkable progress. As of today, we have 182,000 drivers in EVs operating on the Uber platform. To put that into context, when we set those goals 4 years ago, we had just under 10,000. In major European cities, 20% of the kilometers that are driven on our app are now in fully battery electric vehicles. And we're able to go much faster in cities like London and Amsterdam and Lisbon, where we're already at 1 in 3. The result of all of that means that we think Uber is the most widely available electric car network anywhere in the world, and our EV product, Uber Green, is available in 200 cities globally. Nearly half of those are here in Europe. In fact, just last month, we launched Uber Green in Brussels. I used it on the way from the station today. You'll be glad to hear it worked very well. And if you would like to try it, we're providing free trips home worth up to €15. You just have to use the promo code. I think it's going to be up on some of the monitors, Uber Green 1811, and give it a whirl. Tell us what you think. So we're proud of this progress, but we are still some way off of those goals. And the reality is, without bold and urgent action from both policymakers and industry, those long-term goals, but particularly our 2025 interim goals, are going to be very hard for us to meet. It's a challenging economic climate and a turbulent political landscape. And so we need to accelerate electrification efforts wherever we can, but they're becoming a polarized debate. As Mario Draghi's report said on the future of EU competitiveness, the green transition is an opportunity for Europe. It's an opportunity to retain economic competitiveness and ensure that the EU is at the forefront of new green technologies, such as the electrification of transport. And that's going to be essential for Europe's well-being. For us at Uber, the argument on electrification is very clear. We are racing to build the most widely available electric car network in the world because it's the right thing to do for the climate, but it's also the right thing to do for our business. Our drivers love it when they switch to EVs. They never pay for petrol again, they save money in the long term on maintenance, and they save time, and the experience is fun to drive. Riders also love it. It's smoother, it's quieter, it's a more technologically advanced ride, and increasingly when we talk to consumers, they want us to align with their values, particularly the younger cohort for whom the environment is so important. And last of all, cities love it, because when an Uber driver goes electric, they take an average of 250 kilometers worth of emissions off the roads every day. This is why we believe the discussion here today is so important, because by targeting efforts at professional drivers, like Uber drivers, I think you can have an outsized impact on the climate and create a catalyst for a much wider change across society and an acceleration of electrification as a whole. Let's take Uber drivers as the example. They deliver 4 times the emissions benefit of the average motorist because they drive so many miles. And across Europe, we see them going electric 5 times faster today than the general public. So before we hand over to our panel of experts, there's just 2 things I think we should keep top of mind when it comes to how do you help ride-hailing drivers and other professional drivers go electric as quickly as possible. Those 2 things are, number 1, reduce the upfront cost of an EV, and number 2, increase convenient and affordable access to EV charging. Both of these challenges are going to require the introduction of bold policies to make EVs the obvious choice for a professional driver. First and foremost, we need to hold very firm on the 2035 binding targets for banning the sale of ICE cars in Europe. We need to go even further and introduce new targets for corporate fleets and ride-hailing platforms like us at Uber to ban the use of new ICE cars from 2030 and require 100% electrification by 2035 at the very latest. Secondly, governments need to target the policies where they can have the biggest impact. That means offering incentives for high-mileage, low-income drivers, as well as cultivating a widespread second-hand market that's going to benefit those drivers and benefit society as a whole. There's some great examples of this already. In France and Italy, there are subsidies for low-income communities. In Manchester in the UK, they have a programme of grants worth up to £10,000 specifically targeted at the taxi and PHV industry in recognition of the impact that those groups can have on cleaning up the city. And cities can help too. Public space can be an incentive in its own right. In my home city of London, for example, EV drivers don't pay the congestion charge. That's one of the things that's helped make London Uber's greenest city anywhere in the world. Priority access to things like bus lanes or parking is just one of many things that the government in Oslo have done to help Norway really lead the world in electrification. There is a whole range of different ways in which you can try and have maximum possible impact. And then finally on charging infrastructure, it needs to be equitable and accessible. Many drivers don't have driveways or garages, and so access to nearby overnight public charging is absolutely essential. Our data shows us that, unfortunately, many of the Uber drivers live in neighborhoods where this infrastructure is lacking today. These charging deserts in our cities are holding back countless people from making the switch they want to make into newer, cleaner technologies. Amsterdam's right to charge policy is a great example of trying to address that challenge, and we'd love to see similar things rolled out in other cities across Europe. So I'll just finish by saying we think the message is clear. This is the time to speed up on electrification, not to slow down. EVs are a bright spot in our energy transition, and they can play a critical role in securing the competitiveness of the EU in the future. But if we're going to hit those collective goals, all of us, governments, industry, companies like Uber, have got to keep our ambitions very high. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Chris. All right, let's get to our panel. Please welcome to the stage William Tots, Executive Director at the NGO Transport and Environment. Lucy Matera, Secretary General of Charge Up Europe. It's an industry association for EV charging in the bloc. And Daniel Mess, member of the Cabinet of European Commissioner for Climate Action. Thanks, everybody. Well, I want to hear from you all first in the audience. If you could, raise your hand if you took a ride-hailing platform to get to the event today. All of 4. And how many of those were EVs? Keep your hand raised if it was an EV. 1. No, 2. 1 from our 3. Okay, but more than half from our sponsors, so I don't think that counts. Some work to do, apparently. Well, that highlights then our first question of what do you guys think is the biggest roadblock today to electrification across Europe? And Daniel, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that going forward, the stability in the political direction is important. When businesses speak to me, that's really the first thing that they ask for, actually, that the dot on the horizon stays a firm dot so that they know where to invest. So the stability is very important, and lots of things were already said about that, about the stability of the transition as we have foreseen it so far in Europe towards 2035, the target that we all know. And then next to that, I think that what is important is that we take the sectoral dialogue with the industry very seriously, because targets without a visible industrial plan to get there are complicated things. We've seen that in the political debate, and I personally really understand that point of view. And that's why I think it's also good that the next European Commission will do that automotive strategy. And what we're going to discuss today, of course, should be part of that debate. So the two are important. So on the one hand, the stability, but the stability, I think, also comes at the price of doing a sectoral dialogue. And I would not be surprised if the automotive dialogue becomes a bit like a strategic dialogue as we have it with the farming community.
Lucy, what do you make of that?
First of all, I'm going to completely support what Daniel just said on policy predictability. The EV charging infrastructure industry, as its name indicates, is an infrastructure industry. And as we all know, infrastructures are very capex intensive, right? So when you make those investments, you want to make sure that there's a point in time when you're going to become profitable. And that's a few years from now, and that's okay, as long as you still have that stability and policy predictability against which you made all of your business planning, right? So that's one. On your question, Jordan, the biggest roadblock, For us, it's very clear that it's grid connections. So grid connection would be particularly relevant for taxis or fleets. Why? Because typically their pickup is going to be close to major destinations, right, where there's already a degree of congestion. Just to give you a number, in Europe, when you want to be connecting your chargers to the grid, that's going to take you 2 years now. We have members who deploy charging network in Europe and in China. In China, it's 3 months, right? So you have 2 years in Europe, 3 months in China. Not completely sure we want to be going, full Chinese on that one. It's not. It's a model that has, major drawbacks, but clearly there's room for progress. And I heard what Chris said. We need to deploy much more actively. We do want to be doing that, right? There's appetite from the sector to be doing that, but when you're waiting for your grid connection, then of course that's slow you down. And I can just give you one example. We have one member, it's not even a big member, it's a regional member, active in CE countries. They have 300 locations at the moment waiting for the grid connection, 300 locations. And you have several chargers per location, right? So you're just like sitting here waiting for your connection to the grid, and it will come at some point, but certainly not as fast as we would like.
William, is these delays in grid operation or in infrastructure, is that having an impact on European automakers' overall competitiveness in the global automotive race?
That's a great question, but let me first add an element. I would start by saying that 5 years ago we were at 1-2% BEV sales in Europe. Okay, right now we're at 14%. So the last couple of years we've made tremendous progress. Now there's a lot of political debate about oh, it should have been higher, it's not growing fast enough. But we came from a situation where people said, oh, this is never going to work. We're now at 14%, which is precisely where we predicted we would be in 2024. Okay. If we want to move to mass market, what we need is mass market products from the car makers. We need vehicles in all the different segments at affordable prices. Yesterday I was driving around with my family and I was just looking out the window. I saw an ID3, big affiche in Belgium, 25,000 euros. A couple of streets further down the road, I saw a C3, EC3 Citroën car, 23,000 euros. That's, I think, that's closer to where we need to be than 37,000 euros for an ID3. And this is actually what is going to make or break the mass market, affordable vehicles that normal people can buy. And the reason we haven't been seeing these vehicles in the last years, but we're starting to see them now, is that car makers are gearing up to comply with their 2025 CO2 standards. And that is starting to work. So I think that is actually the biggest thing we need to do in Europe to scale from the niche, which is 14%, to 25, 30, and then to 50%, which is kind of the target for 2030, which, and that's the last thing I'll say, which is entirely feasible because in China, right now, we are already above 50%, and they made that progress in just 3 years.
2025 has been on the minds of pretty much everyone in the industry. Lots of pleas to delay that, to reduce the fines, do away with the fines altogether. Daniel, do you have any sense from the Commission of whether they are going to acquiesce to any of those demands?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that William touched upon a point that is relevant, that indeed the way to make competitive mass market cars, so the more affordable models in Europe, that is the golden question to crack in the automotive strategy, in my view. Because if you look at European car makers, where lots of this sound now comes from, what they're good at is making the higher end models, SUVs, also the electric ones, where they're struggling, and competition should be on the mindset of all as being important. We do need these European players too, to make sure that the mass market kickstarts. So we have lots of sympathy for that, but that is the core, I think, of the automotive strategy, and the discussion that we should be having with the automotive sector on like how do we crack that nut, that we allow you to make more of these mass market cars, ramp them up, earn money with it, profits, and make sure that consumers benefit. If changing the 2025 target is the answer to that I think is, I will be very skeptical, because if you really look at the real situation that's going on, there are indeed one, potentially two very important companies in Europe, very important car makers that are struggling. We saw the same development a bit when we had the 2020 target coming in for the amount of vehicles that needed to be produced to comply with the CO2 rules. Then also one company ultimately paid the fine. It's unfortunately the same company that is now also asking for changing the 25 target. It's Volkswagen that paid 30 million euros back in the days 2020 because they were not ready for that target. And you see that other players, including BMW, and that was not the biggest fan of the CO2 rules at the time, they're saying we're actually okay, we're fine. 25 target, same coming from Stellantis, super important player too, just as big in terms of market presence as Volkswagen. And it would, as working for a politician, I don't think that the fair solution is just because a few are having difficulties, you change the ballgame for everybody else. That would just not be fair to the other companies that invested and did the work. So changing the 25 target is I think, not the answer. And I think that the commissioner candidates all said the same thing, not only my boss, but also the incoming transport commissioner, Tzitzikostas, and Ribera. But obviously, you need to have a discussion with these companies. And Volkswagen is a super important company for Europe's future. So the door should be open in discussing, what do you need to be more comfortable in the big times ahead. Volkswagen is pretty stable about the 2035 endgame, but is having a discussion on how do we get there also in the coming years. That discussion we should definitely have. There's a debate to be had on where do these fines, penalty payments, how big is that number actually? Because I see some of the numbers that are floating around are a bit, to be honest, back of the envelope calculations based on what the market is right now, and then you see a 15 billion euro number floating around. I don't think that's entirely the correct number. So my plea has always been, let's first speak with Volkswagen and the others to get a firm view really on what the scale of the challenge is, and then let's see what type of strategy can help them to get there. Fines currently go into the European budget. They could also go to other things. Charging infrastructure, incentives for customers to buy the cars. Ultimately, that's the type of discussion that I think our door should be open for, because we do ultimately need these companies also to get us to 2025 and then beyond.
On the subject of money, the funds is a good point. I've speaking with the head of the French Taxi Association a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that the drivers are primarily in favor of electric cars, but there's a lot of concerns about who is going to be picking up the cost of them going from ICs to EVs, and also who is going to be picking up the cost for the charging infrastructure. I believe Chris mentioned this at the start, that a lot of these drivers are living in apartment buildings. There's not infrastructure already established there. Many apartment buildings have actually banned EVs over fire fears, unfounded or otherwise. So Lucy, who do you think should be picking up the bill for the charging infrastructure and for these drivers to make the move?
So that's a business question, but I can tell you how we're trying to approach it as a sector. So as often with EV charging, it's not going to be one solution fitting everything. You're going to rely on a combination of multi-layered solution. You want to make sure that those drivers have some opportunity to charge at low speed, right? Close to where they live, roughly speaking, right? And that would be for overnight charging mostly, right? And they should be able to do that in a way that's affordable, accessible financially. But that will be, their needs during the day will be completely different. During the day, they will need to charge very fast, very quickly, so that they can be on their way, because they want to maximize the time that they have, in the vehicle, not waiting. But they have other needs too. They may want, they're on the road all day long. Well, maybe it's useful for them at some point to have a little break, right? And so some of the solutions that our members are bringing, I have a member who has a partnership with McDonald's, and this is for taxi, this not for Uber, but some of the needs are similar. And so they have this partnership with McDonald's. If you're a taxi driver, you can come, you charge, you're provided with good fast charging power, and at the same time you have a good discount for anything that's coming from McDonald's. I don't know exactly the amount. You can also use the facilities at McDonald's. That's the kind of offer that you want to have, all right? With specifically Uber, there's also a partnership. It started in the UK, will be deployed in other countries. So the way this works when you're a charging infrastructure, you have this massive cost that comes with deploying the charging infrastructure, and basically you earn money whenever someone comes and charges at your station. And today, that someone is like already a small number of people, right? But that's okay. At some point there will be more drivers, and we'll find profitability. But so in the meantime, what we're trying to find is pockets of demand, right, that will come, and charge at your infrastructure. So what you're going to do is that you're going to sign partnership with some of those companies and say, look, I can make my network available for you, right? And you're going to have a discount. Okay, and in exchange, your interest as an EV charging infrastructure operator is that gives you demand that's predictable. Okay, so you increase your volume, you increase the number of drivers that come and charge at your network, which makes your business more, well, not yet profitable, but it's more sustainable financially, right? And in exchange for that sort of increased demand that's brought to your network, then you give them a good discount. So that's the kind of, let's say, a creative solution that you need to offer to those fleets, the discount in exchange for the volume, but also additional, services, benefits that they can get that meets the need that they have as people who are on the road all day long.
A lot of the ride-hailing apps have made pledges for, putting money into infrastructure or helping their drivers with cheaper cars. William, that makes for really great marketing. Is it window dressing, or is it actually having an impact?
Good question. So back in 2019, TNE was one of the organizations calling on companies like Uber to lead the world in electrifying. And I have to say that I've seen a major shift in how the company has approached it since 2019. They committed to very ambitious goals in 7 European cities. I think as it stands, I think London is the best with 25% electric miles, and it's Lisbon and a couple of other cities, so it's like somewhere between 25 and 5%. That's for the record, that's not good enough, because your goal is higher than that. But I think we have seen real commitment there. And if I think of what Uber is doing in London, where they are, telling they created a fund. They're using their buying power to make deals with global companies to offer cheaper vehicles to their drivers, to give their drivers incentives. I think, that it shows that if companies commit at scale, that they can find solutions to all the problems we are debating here. Because ultimately we can talk about it, and the McDonald's example is a good one, and I can talk about other charging funds and solutions, but all of these are practical implementation problems, and they all follow from a commitment to actually make this happen. And I give you one example. In my own country, Belgium, 3 years ago, it was a basket case. Very low EV sales. There was no charging anywhere. Right now, EV sales are up, and there's charging everywhere. A lot of fast charging. It's going so fast. Why? Because the government changed the tax rules, and the whole company car fleet is going electric very fast. And so what happens, and the point you made about this is a business question, I think this is the essential point about charging. If you want the charging industry to invest, be it in Antwerp or in London or in Paris or in any country, they need to have the visibility that there's going to be people that want to use their services. It's as simple as that. And so that's where things like the fleet targets, like the CO2 targets come in, because they give that visibility to companies that they can invest over a 5 to 10 year horizon, and that they will make money. That's how our economy works. And then there's a lot of things that you can do to grease the wheels. You need to make the permitting easier. You need to give a bit of subsidies here and there, remove some barriers, but you start with a commitment and a market.
Car makers would say, well, we need the charging infrastructure in order for us to want to make these EVs, because people need to charge and they're afraid to buy their cars for fear that they'll get stuck in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, okay. Well, what can I say other than what I just said? I think the reality is that, if you would ask the whole room here to go electric today, it would be a problem that there's not enough charging. But that's not what anybody is doing. Everybody, governments, the EU, are saying, we have, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, we want that share of the market to go electric. If you give that visibility to the market, the companies, the charging industry, the grid operators can prepare for it, and they will do it. If you look at Norway, you look at Belgium, you look at the Netherlands, you look at California, look at China, like the biggest country in the world, you see that this is possible. And when I listen to the car makers, I have a lot of sympathy for them, but I also think, guys, the writing has been on the wall for 10 years.
they've had time.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the corporate fleet that von der Leyen laid out in her mandate for Cici Costas. In the hearings, though, we got very little details, mostly just a bunch of talking points. Lucy, what do you think that the corporate fleet mandate needs to include in order to actually be effective?
I think, okay, it needs to be something that makes sense for the business, I think. What we keep hearing from car makers is you need to sustain demand, you need to sustain demand, you need to sustain demand. All of the regulations we've been facing in the past has been about supply, so we're just feeling the pinch, and on demand there's nothing happening. Fine, I think there's a degree of misrepresentation around that, but okay, then here is your giant opportunity to sustain demand, because basically 60% of new car registration, that's coming from corporates. Okay, so if you don't tap into that pool of potential demand, then you're just, if you're trying to electrify, then you cannot leave, you can't leave any stone left unturned, right? You really have to explore every option, especially if, the cries that we're hearing from the car makers are a little bit exaggerated, but okay, let's take them seriously. Well, here is your chance to sustain that demand, right? At Charge-Up, we've commissioned independent research to understand what would happen on the market for EVs if corporate fleets electrified at the same speed as passenger cars? Because for the moment, passenger cars are electrifying reasonably fast, and in corporates are just really lagging behind and not really putting up their weight on that front. We've identified, without any surprises, that would bring millions of additional vehicles to the EU market. It's quite interesting that. Germany is particularly important here. We've modeled that basically that would bring an additional 6 million EVs in Germany, right? The impact would actually be negative on Belgium because, as you said, William, they've electrified so much now. If you apply the same rate, that would actually slow down the rate of electrification in Belgium. But for several countries, it would give a really big boost. So at the minimum, at least for the LDV segment, we would want to see a mandate that those companies need to electrify at the same speed as passenger cars, and that's really the minimum that this should be doing.
Daniel, the climate commissioner and the transport commissioner are going to be having to work together on a lot of these files, including corporate fleets, clean industrial deal, automotive industrial plan, probably others that I'm forgetting. What are going to be the sticking points, do you think, in the Commission in order to come to a consensus on what these plans should actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I think that what we're now discussing on the corporate fleet initiative is a good test case for the type of thinking that I think is now emerging, at least inside of the Parlement. Now, people who came to the event thinking now the Commission will confirm that we will propose fleet-wide targets for corporate fleets have to hold their breath a bit for that. And the reason why I'm saying that is, so I think that initiative will be coming because both the climate and the transport incoming commissioners, while my boss is incoming and at the same time. And Cici Costas said that's a good area to look at, and it also makes sense. It's an area where currently some of our European car makers still have a bit of a stronghold. But if it's still an open question whether actually really fleet-wide targets are the answer to that, what I think is interesting to see also when you look at Uber, and that's really good experience to look at. So which is definitely a big player, and but if you look at it, target, but ultimately incentives is the trick. Incentives for the driver to actually go there. And when you look at the results that came out of this big public consultation that we did on what shape should this initiative take, lots of people actually said it's the fiscal incentives that really make a difference. And not everybody said it's the binding target that is the difference. At the same time, you must also really pay very close attention, especially nowadays, on where you focus your initiative on. I think that there are a few players out there where you think, is it politically a good idea to go for those? Maybe not. Like, is it a good idea to immediately ask the butcher and the plumber around the corner to electrify the corporate fleet? That I think we should be a bit cautious about. You can, of course, look at some of these bigger players out there, the IKEAs and all these leading multinational companies, Uber, by the way, being one amongst them already. It's good to see in an area, is something moving already there, and can we give that a little boost, something that is already moving. So that, I think, is an important question to tackle. Like, is it that type of corporate customer that we will be looking at? So really the big companies that offer their employees a leasing arrangement for their company car, or the Ubers that works with drivers, rather than the butcher around the corner or the plumber around the corner. And the other thing is, like, also if you start going into like really the big rental car space, you really get into complicated questions. Because if I go to one of the rental companies, I will not do advertisement for any other company in Uber today. If I go to one of these rental companies at the airport, it really depends on where I'm going, whether the electric car is actually the option that works for me. If I go to a holiday destination where there's no charging infrastructure, then we actually leave the rental company renting it to me with a car that I currently cannot use. So that you need to have a serious discussion on what type of enabling environment do you need to go there. But I think that the big multinationals, like, again, the IKEAs, the ones that I really want to go there, that's an interesting area to look at, and then see what works best in that area. Is it fiscal incentives, like we also now have in Germany, by the way? Germany did introduce fiscal incentives for company cars again, or do you do something else? I think that's the type of work that my boss needs to start discussing with the transport commissioner. I think that is now the area to look at. Yeah.
What do you make of that, William?
What to say? Like, I am quite frustrated that we have been so slow on the fleets. Back in 2009, when we did the Uber campaign, back in 2009 in Shenzhen, like 100% of taxis was electric, and there's probably 100 other cities that I don't know the name of where they had the similar makeup of the fleet. And so for the last 5 years, we have been talking about, maybe shall we not do this? I don't understand that. I mean, as you said, the car companies say, if we want to move forward, we need to make sure that we have demand. Here is a wonderful opportunity to guarantee the car makers a big market. This is 50-60% of the market in Europe. It's much more in a country like Germany. It's a market that is very high mileage, that is, from a TCO point of view, is really ideal. If you move that market, you're going to have affordable second-hand vehicles coming into the market. And yet, here we are still thinking, well, it's a good idea, I really like the idea, but it's probably going to be an initiative. I don't understand that. And I had these beautiful talking points, but I think in the end it comes down to the Commission says, and the European Council says, we want a clean industrial deal. We want to transform the automotive industry in Europe. A transformation means that you go from one thing to the next. So it does require change. And it's really all about that. Do we want to change? And are we prepared to transition from the ICE business to the electric business, yes or no? If that is still our intention, we should absolutely put forward an electric fleets regulation, and then you can talk about the mechanics. Is it the right thing to go after the plumber, or do you adopt the Belgian model? There's many ways to do this. You can put targets on member states. You can give them flexibility. The French may want to put a fleet law. Others may want to go for fiscal incentives. Give them that flexibility. But to say that we're not certain about this, I don't understand that.
Do you have a response?
No, but I think that I think what we're all aiming towards is like, can this segment play a bigger role in this transition? There are various reasons why it's interesting. There is already stuff moving in that space, multinational companies. It's also a space where integrating the use of the car with charging infrastructure, you can have quite a firm discussion on that, because usually. Depends a bit, but like companies do have an idea when a company car is needed for exactly which trip. They do have a garage in their own building. They can actually use smart charging in a way that they can, use the excess energy in a company car to really give energy for the elevators. So there's, I think, lots of things happening there, and I think they're all getting towards like, how do we use the energy in the segment in a way that it brings things forward. But then, William, I really do insist that the space needs to be competitive and that we should not all fully go Chinese in that segment, to be very Dutch in my debating style, because that competition is really important. Really, to make a transition to electric vehicles that is ultimately in the long-term interest of the consumers, you do need competition, and that's the tough nut to crack. We all do want to move to this space. I think that the shape, if you look into in a space like this, how that should be done is still open, and that's why it should be part of the sectoral dialogue, also with the automotive makers, because I do think that they will have an opinion on this too. I think you need something firmer than just pinky promises by companies to go a certain way. I'm just saying, at this stage, we don't know whether the full fleet target for everybody is the right answer. But I think that both competent commissioners, and they both are competent in many ways, really want to have a serious look at this.
Do you have a time frame for us? Look at 1 year, 2 year. We'll still be having the same conversation at the end of 5 years. Do you have to make a prediction?
Okay, so I think that if this is part of like this what I already mentioned already, this, I would again not be surprised that the automotive industry gets a bit of a sectoral dialogue at the same level as the farming community now has. And if you want to move the needle, then obviously you need to come out, early enough in 2025 with an idea on how to get there for different reasons, because there are many questions out there, not only about corporate fleets, but about the broader play of Europe in this area. So that should, I think, be the timing that would make sense. But again, it's also not me. I'm just sharing now my personal opinion on this, because it depends on so many factors. It also depends on the European Parliament greenlighting the European Commission to start with, how much time you still have to come out. But of course, early next year should be something that you should work towards in giving the clear signal where you want to take this, because there is high demand to, justifiably so, in the broader society, not only from the automotive industry, but the broader society on which direction that it takes. The 2025 time horizon, we mentioned already, that's an important one. Then the horizon towards 2030 is an important one, and many of the other discussions that we're seeing on like which fuel alternative could work, that is in any event something for the longer term. It's where a lot of the political debate is focusing, but if you really look, if you're a politician that wants to solve problems that matter right now, the fuel development is something that you can still take time for in terms of using the review as foreseen for that. But these type of questions, where do we want to take the corporate segment? Where do we want to move the needle in terms of having more mass market cars, electric, coming to market affordable way? Which type of triggers do we need to pull? That those are the crucial questions.
Luce, I want to turn to you. Obviously, there's a lot of discussions happening in Europe right now from automakers wanting e-fuel exceptions, wanting to move back the targets. With Trump's election in the US, he's threatening to do away with the emission reduction targets that the US has set, both of which creates an environment in which there's less pressure on automakers to electrify. What do you think the impact is going to be on European consumers? Are you expecting them to still want to take up electric cars? Do you think that this transition is now going to be taking longer? Sort of your crystal ball.
Well, I don't have a crystal ball. We should be focusing on what we can do within the EU, all right? And whatever happens in the US is going to happen in the US is probably largely beyond our control, and voilà. In the EU, we still have, the possibility not to impose high tariffs on vehicles that are less expensive, and I'm sure there will be different views on the panel, that's okay, but at the end of the day, the question is, are we in the business of making the transition more expensive for EU consumers, all right? Which is what would happen with tariffs, most probably. And if the answer to that question is no, then we should probably adapt our trade policy to those parameters, okay? Crucially, what you do want to see is those new models of cheaper EVs coming to the EU market, and there's I think 8. I know you're tracking those models very closely at TNE. I think it's 8 or maybe 10 models that are coming next year. That will be much cheaper. Okay, so that's one. And then you want to be using the corporate fleet initiative to stimulate the second-hand market, right? Because after a while, those vehicles reach the second-hand market, and that's very useful to make it more democratic. Okay, so regardless of what happens in the US, I think we can get a little bit distracted by that. I think we should keep the discussion on, well, it's going to happen whatever happens. What do we want to be doing at EU level? Okay, regardless of what happened in the US, do we still want to accept that it takes 2 years to connect your charging locations to the grid? Well, I don't care about what's happening with Trump. That's unacceptable regardless of whether Trump is in the office or not. Okay, so let's fix what we can fix in Europe, right? Make sure that whatever decisions we make should be driven by the interest of the consumers, and it's not in the interest of the consumers to have a more expensive transition. And then, voilà, the rest, I guess we'll have to see what comes out of the White House.
Did you have something to add, William?
Yeah, on the US, obviously that's a big question. I think the most important thing to watch in the United States is what happens to the IRA, or IRA. There are 2 types of credits in IRA. One is the production credits, the other is the consumer credits. It looks like consumer credits are going to be scrapped, but the production credits, there's a lot of support from that, and there was a group of almost 20 Republican congressmen and women coming out in favor of keeping those. So this is, you're looking at a subsidy of $3,000 to $4,000 per vehicle for made in the United States electric cars. So if that stays, and I think it will, that means that the US will still be absolutely in the business of competing with Europe and China on EVs. And I think that's where it all comes down to. We're in a race where our car makers are competing with BYD, Tesla, and a bunch of other companies. We're not winning right now. We need to catch up, but I think a lot of those companies are actually present in China, trying to compete in China, which is this is really important, right? All our car makers, our German car makers, they make so much money in China. If they do not have a compelling competitive electric car product in that market, they have a huge problem. And so it would be disastrous for Europe to now say, oh, we can slow down a little bit. We'll give you some more years of ICE profits, and it will be fine. Because that is effectively what we're looking at. You have 2025, and then you have 2030, and then a huge political debate about what the future of the automotive industry is. So do the 2030 targets stand? Do the 2035 targets stand? Yes, says everybody, but it also depends. Everybody's going to be watching. Is the Commission, is the EU really driving this process forward? Yes or no? Are we putting additional pressure on those car makers to up their game? Yes or no? And I think we have to do that. Otherwise, those great car makers that we have today, they will no longer be great in 5 years. It's as simple as that. Great companies have disappeared or declined before. And I think of a big American car maker when I was young, General Motors, and then at some point General Motors was not so great anymore. So this can happen everywhere. So this is what the game is about, and all this hesitation, this e-fuel nonsense. It's really idiotic. It's like the fact that we're still debating whether we should put a $9,000 per ton fuel into a car. It's insane. It's insane.
Lucy?
Yeah, I wanted to also on the e-fuel thing. You've heard Chris, the best technology. We all know what the best technology is, right? So at the end, there's also a moment where the market would just say, here's the best technology, and I think, electrification will win no matter what. And I forgot the other point that I wanted to make after what you said, but I will come back to mind.
In the meantime, let's turn to our Slido questions. Niels Anderson from Anemone Technology, I'm sure I butchered all of that, asks, any opinion on why Denmark and Norway are moving much faster to EVs than the south of Europe? Daniel, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think that if you take Norway is of course a country that had sort of the total package, the total package in terms of proposition in electric mobility. They had a clear idea about the infrastructure. They had a clear idea about I pay less tax or less road tolls if I go electric than other, and I think that helped. That stability in a sense of this is the dot on the horizon that we're going to, and these are all these enabling steps to make sure that the cars come to market and used by consumers. And I think that's indeed, I spoke with the Norwegians a lot because, yeah, it's an interesting country to speak to in terms of the automotive strategy that now needs to come for the entirety of Europe. And that is, that's now the game we should avoid. Like, you know, I agree with William to the extent that should stay the stable course. And I think that the candidate commissioners, at least from their side, said that that is also the ballgame, and that's also the experience that you see. As soon as you start trying to go in either direction in changing the course right now, either more ambitious or slow down, it gets blocked. It gets blocked between the EU countries, and also the majority in parliament are not clear. So I would also second that the right thing to do is not like try to veer massively off course and then get blocked later on in the political process because nobody is helped by that. The stability is quite important, but like we haven't gotten the enabling framework as right as we should have gotten it in terms of making it happen, and that's why Norway is an interesting country to look at. And I think that one dimension that we also should start looking at is also the whole cybersecurity dimension. European car makers are pretty good in terms of cyber safety of our driving, and I think that's also like a strength to start building upon, because we are going to live in the reality where the two will really come together, the digital and the sustainable transition and cyber safety of our driving is really important. And I think that's also an aspect that that could come back a bit more in the discussion, given the fact that the European industry is quite good at that.
There's been discussions about banning Chinese software in new vehicles. The US wants to move forward. There's been some pressure on Europe to take that up. Do you see the Commission jumping on that?
Yeah, but the American way of doing it came pretty quickly. I'm just saying that if you look at also other areas, because automotive is one area where we're dealing with the clean growth agenda, there are also other areas, hydrogen. We have started looking at that cyber security element a bit more, really to see, you know, what are the protocols in place to make sure that the cyber safety is guaranteed, and that's also, I think, the discussion that we should continue having. And there are different ways to get there. I can't say at this stage right now the American way is the way. Let's also, as William says, let's see what the American way will be when we will have a new president in the White House. I'm just saying, when it comes to other areas, like the last auction of public support that we did for hydrogen, for instance, cybersecurity came back in that far more, because in terms of your security of everything that you're doing, that really needs to come back. And I don't know if you have like some experience already with the cyber safety dimension.
Yeah, I mean, not precisely to share here, because members wouldn't necessarily want to be sharing that, but there's some degree of regulation that apply, of course, to cyber networks. I agree with you. That needs to be perfectly cyber safe, right? We all have a duty of care with the data of the drivers, and that's shared across. That needs to be shared across the ecosystem.
Dr. Tobias Schweikart from Daimler Truck wants to know, isn't the best way for greening fleets to make ICE vehicles and their operations more expensive than CO2 neutral vehicles by taxes, tolls, VO2 certificates? William, do you have a comment?
There is not one best way, but it is clearly a good way. If you look at what Germany has done with their road toll for trucks, they have increased the road toll significantly for ICE trucks, and obviously if you pay 18 cents or what is it, like 15 cents more per kilometer if you're a diesel truck, then obviously that's gonna be extremely beneficial for battery electric trucks. So that helps. All of these things help, and I think the point is that once you have agreed on a direction of travel, there's all sorts of things you can do to accelerate and to grease the wheels. You can give subsidies. You can give. What the Norwegians and the Danes do is they reduce their very high purchase taxes specifically for electric vehicles. There's a million things you can do, but the point is, are you clear on what you're trying to do? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you to our panelists. thank you for all of you for joining us, giving us a lot of food for thought, particularly around targets and what the Commission is going to be doing in the next few months. We'll just take a quick look at the results of the poll. The question, if you'll remember, was what should be the top priority of the Greening Corporate Fleets Initiative? And I am too far away to actually read what that top one is. Daniel, can you help me out?
Yeah, I think that the incentives won, but the mandates got quite some. So 36% incentivizing demand with subsidies or other cost cuts, 28% binding mandates, 23% charging, that went up, and 13% low emission zones in cities.
All right, well, I guess you'll be looking in the couch cushions for some extra coins for mandates and incentives. Finally, thank you to our speakers for joining us, the audience for joining us in person, and also those of you who are joining us online. And thank you to our partner, to Uber, for sponsoring this. We'd like to hear your feedback, so feel free to email us about the event at live@politico.eu. And you can check our events website for the latest lineup of everything that is happening. And now the part that we've all been waiting for, the cocktail hour, which will be upstairs.
Excellent.
So thank you, everybody.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Development and looking ahead.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?